The plane touched down on the runway at Reykjavik, Iceland. The moment the wheels hit the tarmac, I switched off my phone, the screen went dark, and in its final second, it still displayed Lou Bachin's 23rd missed call. I didn't answer it. I didn't plan to. 3 days ago, I was still in his study that day. Lou Bachin said he had a business dinner and told me not to wait for him to eat. I smiled and said okay. Then ironed the suit he'd wear the next day without a second thought. Before he left, he said, "Thanks for your hard work," his tone flat, like he was talking to the household help. I was used to it, that's how it had been for 5 years, but he forgot one thing, the key to the bottom drawer of his study. I was the one who had it replaced. I crouched down to find an old document and accidentally nudged that drawer open. It slid out, revealing a red booklet inside. The cover was embossed with 3 gold characters, marriage certificate. I froze for 2 seconds, then I reached out, picked it up, and opened it. On the first page, Lou Bachin's photo, smiling tenderly. Beside it, the photo of a woman I recognized, Louie, the first love Lou Bachin always said had gone abroad and never come back. The date of registration, 3 months ago. I stared at that date, and suddenly remembered that day 3 months ago, Lou Bachin had called me, saying there was a big project at the company and he'd be working late. I made soup and brought it to his office building. The security guard told me he'd left long ago. I thought it was just a business dinner, didn't think much of it. Turns out, that day he went to get married. I put the marriage certificate back in the drawer, closed it, and stood up. My legs felt a little weak, but I knew I couldn't fall. I steadied myself against the desk for a moment, then picked up my phone. A message popped up on the screen. It was from the butler at the Sia family's old mansion. "Miss Wen, the old master suddenly had a heart attack. He's been rushed to the emergency room at Renai Hospital. Please come quickly, Mr. Sia can't be reached." A string of Lou Bachin's phone numbers followed, probably because the butler couldn't get through and was frantic. I looked at this message, then glanced down at the closed drawer. I suddenly felt like fate was playing a cruel joke. "Lou Bachin, the moment you need to beg me has come." I didn't call Lou Bachin. I called my colleague at Renai Hospital, the head of cardiothoracic surgery, Dr. Chen. "Sister Wen, the old master's condition isn't good. He needs an immediate bypass surgery. The entire Sia family is here, but they can't find Mr. Sia. No one can sign the consent form." I said, "I'm on my way." After hanging up, I grabbed my car keys and left. Halfway there, my phone rang. "Lou Bachin," I answered. His voice was frantic. "Qinglan, where are you now? Grandpa's in trouble. Come to Renai quickly," I said. "I'm already on the road." "Good, hurry up," he said. "The doctors here say they need to operate immediately. They say they won't dare move without you. Come sign the form," I said. "Got it." After hanging up, I pulled the car over to the side of the road and looked at my face in the rearview mirror. My eyes weren't red, my makeup wasn't smudged. I looked exactly the same as usual. I smiled at myself in the mirror, then started the car again. When I arrived at Renai Hospital, the hallway was packed with Sia family members. Sia Yunjing stood at the entrance of the emergency room, his suit and tie askew, his face slick with sweat. The moment he saw me, he rushed over and grabbed my arm. "Qinglan, you're finally here. Grandpa's been waiting inside. Dr. Chen said you have to perform the surgery. No one else, only you. He doesn't trust anyone else." I looked at his hand gripping my arm, then slowly pried his fingers off. I said, "Step aside, let me go in and take a look." Inside the emergency room, Xie Changfeng lay on the operating table, tubes and wires everywhere. The old man was 68, usually in good health, but this sudden heart attack was critical. The ECG next to him was erratic, the monitor beeping incessantly. Dr. Chen saw me come in, wiped his sweat, and handed me the surgical gown. "Sister Wen, his heart rate keeps dropping. The stent can't be placed. We have to do a bypass. Do you think we should?" I took the surgical gown and paused. "Let me think about it." Lou Bachin, standing at the door, heard me say think about it and rushed straight in. "What do you have to think about? Grandpa's about to die." "When Qinglan, get up there and operate now." I turned to look at him. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair was a mess, the collar of his shirt was unbuttoned, revealing his collarbone. There was a faint red mark on it. I recognized that kind of mark. "Last night, he didn't come home, said he was at the company all night reviewing reports. Looks like he was with Louis." I didn't say a word. I handed the surgical gown back to Dr. Chen, walked to the side, and took off my white coat. Lou Bachin panicked. He grabbed my wrist. "When Qinglan, what do you mean by this? Grandpa has always been good to you. you know that in your heart, and now you're going to abandon him. I looked at his hand, then at his face. I had seen this face for 5 years. Every morning before he left, I would straighten his tie. He liked his black coffee without sugar, hated cilantro. And every time he came back from a business trip, he would bring me a silk scarf. I thought that was love until that red booklet appeared before my eyes. I shook off his hand. My voice was very calm. Xiaoyinjing, where's your wife? He froze. What wife? My wife is you, isn't it? We haven't registered yet, is that so? I smiled. Then the marriage certificate you got 3 months ago. Who did you get it with? The hallway went dead silent. Every member of the Xie family turned to stare at Liu Beichen. The color drained from his face in a single second. His lips trembled twice, but he couldn't get a single word out. No need to explain. I turned to Dr. Chin, I'm not doing the surgery on old Master Xia. Find another doctor. I grabbed my coat and started walking out. Liu Beichen chased after me and blocked my path. His voice had already changed pitch. Qinglan, I'm begging you. Grandpa really can't wait. We can talk about everything else later. Just save him first. I stopped and turned to look at him. His face was streaked with tears. His whole body was shaking. In the past, seeing him like this, my heart would have softened long ago, but not today. I said, go find your wife. Isn't Louis your legal wife? Go tell her to perform the surgery. Liu Beichen's knees buckled. He nearly fell to the ground. He reached out, trying to grab my sleeve. I sidestepped and dodged him. The old Mrs. Xia behind me tottered out, grabbing my arm. Qinglan, let's go home and talk about any misunderstandings. Your grandfather really. I gently pulled my arm free. Grandma Xia, did you know your grandson got a marriage certificate with someone else 3 months ago? The old woman turned to look at Liu Beichen, shock written all over her face. He stood there, sweat and tears dripping from his chin, looking like all the bones had been pulled out of him. I turned and walked toward the elevator. Behind me came Liu Beichen's heart-wrenching voice. When Qinglan, stop right there. If anything happens to Grandpa because you left, I'll never let you off. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and pressed the close button. Just as the door slid shut, I saw Liu Beichen drop to his knees in the hallway, pounding his fists against the floor. The elevator descended. I pulled out my phone from my pocket and opened a booking app, a flight to Iceland. First thing tomorrow morning. I wasn't going to let him find me. Chapter 2, Disappearing Overnight. When I walked out of Renai Hospital, the sky was pitch black. I drove around the city 3 times, making sure no car from the Xie family was following me, before turning into a narrow alley. At the end of the alley was my own small apartment, bought years ago but never lived in. Liu Beichen didn't know about this place. Once inside, I turned my phone to silent, tossed it onto the couch, and went to the bathroom for a shower. The water was scalding hot, pouring over my head. I closed my eyes, but all I could see was Liu Beichen kneeling in the hallway. I didn't want to cry, not a single tear. 5 years of love thrown to the dogs. Crying would be a waste. After the shower, the phone screen showed 17 more missed calls. Liu Beichen, old Mrs. Xia, and even Xiaoyinjing's assistant, Wang. I didn't reply. I just opened the booking app and bought a ticket for a 6 a.m. direct flight to Reykjavik, Iceland. After buying the ticket, I started packing. Not much, just a carry-on suitcase, passport, bank cards, 2 changes of clothes, and a photo of the marriage certificate. I'd taken it when I found it in the study drawer, clear enough to see both signatures. At 2 a.m., the doorbell rang. I didn't open the door. I looked through the peephole. Xiaoyinjing stood outside, his suit wrinkled, his eyes swollen like walnuts. He clutched his phone, dialing non-stop. My phone buzzed on the couch, his name flashing on the screen. He knocked 3 times, his voice hoarse and barely audible. Qinglan, I know you're in there. Please open the door, Grandpa. He's not going to make it. I stayed silent. He knocked twice more, his forehead pressed against the door. I'm begging you, just this once, save Grandpa. I'll do anything you ask. I still didn't speak. He waited outside for about 5 minutes, then his phone rang. He answered. It must have been the hospital. All I heard was, I'll be right there, before he stumbled away. After his footsteps faded, I closed the peephole cover and leaned against the door, letting out a long breath. Liu Beichen, now you're begging me, when you were holding Louis's hand getting that marriage certificate. Why didn't you think of me? At 4 a.m., I pulled my suitcase out the door. A taxi was waiting downstairs, booked in advance through an app. The driver helped me load the suitcase into the trunk and asked where I was going so early. The airport, I said. He glanced at me, probably thinking it was odd for a woman to head to the airport alone at this hour, but he didn't ask. As the car merged onto the highway, the sky was still dark, streetlights falling behind one by one. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to Dr. Chin. Is the surgery arranged? Dr. Chin replied quickly. Sister Wen, General Xie flew in a team of Beijing experts overnight, but the old man's been dragging too long. His vitals are terrible. None of the local doctors dare take it on. General Xie is losing his mind, keeps asking for your number. I replied, forget it, let them figure it out themselves. After sending that, I turned off my phone and tucked it into my bag at the airport. Check-in. Baggage drop, security, all smooth. At the boarding gate, a few Chinese tourists chattered excitedly about seeing the northern lights in Iceland. I sat in a corner, watching the sky outside shift from pitch black to pale gray. At exactly 6 a.m., the boarding announcement came. I stood up and handed over my boarding pass. The flight attendant smiled at me. Ma'am, traveling to Iceland alone? I smiled back. Yes, alone. As the plane took off, the fuselage lurched upward, and the city below shrank into a chessboard of tiny squares. I watched those buildings grow smaller until clouds swallowed them all. Then I pulled down the window shade and closed my eyes. Back in China, the Xie family must be in chaos by now, but I couldn't care anymore. At 3 p.m. Iceland time, the plane landed in Reykjavik. As I walked out of the airport, I turned my phone back on. Hundreds of messages and missed calls flooded in. I didn't read them all, just scanned one from Dr. Chin. Sister Wen, General Xie stormed into our department this morning and trashed the duty room. He said he'll dig through every inch of earth to find you. I smiled faintly, turned the phone off again, and stepped out of the terminal. The wind in Iceland was strong, carrying a cold, crisp sweetness. The sky was an impossible blue, with snow-capped mountains stretching into the distance. I hailed a taxi and told the driver to take me to Vik. There was a Northern Lights hotel there I'd always wanted to stay at. The drive took 2 hours. The hotel was small, perched on the edge of the ice field, overlooking a vast black sand beach and white waves. The front desk clerk, a blonde Icelandic girl, asked in English how long I planned to stay. A week for now, we'll see after that. She checked me in and handed me the key card. Ma'am, traveling to Iceland alone, are you here to relax? Something like that, I said. What's fun around here? She smiled and pointed out the window. The weather is perfect tonight. The chance of seeing the northern lights is very high. You can watch from your room's balcony, or go out onto the ice field. The view is wider out there. I thanked her, picked up my luggage, and headed upstairs. The room was vast, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the icy expanse outside, with the ocean and snow-capped mountains in the distance. The sun was about to set, the horizon burning into a mix of orange red and pink purple. I set down my suitcase, walked to the balcony, and took a deep breath. The wind of Iceland hit my face, cold and crisp. I suddenly felt that the stifling heaviness that had been lodged in my chest for the past 5 days finally began to dissipate, just a little. At 9 in the evening, the aurora came. The green ribbon of light spread across the sky, rolling like a massive silk banner above my head. I wrapped myself in the blanket the hotel had provided, sat on the lounge chair on the balcony, and tilted my head back to gaze at the light. My phone remained off, but I guessed it was around 4 in the morning back in China. Xie Yunjing should be searching the world for me by now. As for the old man, I didn't know how he was doing, but that was his own grandfather, his own concern. Wasn't Louis his wife? At a time like this, a wife should come in handy. I closed my eyes, the aurora filtering through my eyelids, glowing faintly. Then I heard someone calling my name from below the balcony. Wen Qinglan, is that you? I snapped my eyes open and looked down. A man stood below, his down jacket unzipped, still wearing a dress shirt and tie, his hair blown into a mess by the wind. He tilted his head up and shouted at me, his face filled with reckless abandon. Xie Yunjing, how did he find this place? Chapter 3, Confrontation under the Aurora. Xie Yunjing stood in the snow on the hotel lawn, shouting my name, his voice broken by the wind. I didn't stand up, I just sat on the lounge chair on the balcony, looking down at him, clutching the corner of the blanket. How did he find this place? My mind raced. Then I remembered Dr. Chin. Dr. Chin knew I loved Iceland. We'd talked before about wanting to come to Vik to stay at the Aurora Hotel. Xie Yunjing must have forced it out of him. From below, he shouted again, Qinglan, come down, let's talk face to face. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, stood up, and walked to the balcony railing, looking down at him. Xie Yunjing, how did you get here? He stomped the snow off his feet. I chartered a plane. You used your passport too. Buy a plane ticket at the airport, so I checked the flight records and flew straight here. Qinglan, Grandpa is still on the operating table, can you come back with me first? I watched his face, red from the cold, and suddenly found it amusing. He had chartered a plane, crossed half the globe, just to find me, but his grandfather was waiting on the operating table, and he was here chasing after me. Was this supposed to be filial piety, I said, when you got the marriage certificate with Louis? Did you ever think you'd end up like this? He paused in the snow, then looked up. I'll explain that later. It was just a moment of confusion. She's pregnant. She said if I didn't get the certificate with her, she wouldn't go for prenatal checkups. At the time, she's pregnant. I interrupted him. Congratulations, Xiao Xia. You're about to be a father. Qinglan, don't be like this. Like what? I let out a laugh. You married someone else. She's carrying your child, and you still have the nerve to come begging me for help. Xia Yunjing, what do you take me for? He stood below, silent for a long time. The aurora continued to churn in the sky, its green light reflecting on his face, turning what was once a handsome face a sickly pale. After a while, he spoke again, his voice dropping low. I know I'm a bastard, but Grandpa is truly innocent. He's always cared for you since you were young. Remember the time you got sick and he flew back from abroad overnight, staying by your bedside in the hospital? I didn't say anything. He was telling the truth. Xia Changfeng had indeed been good to me. The first time I met him, I was still a graduate student. My advisor had taken me to the Xia family home to treat Grandma Xia. When the old man heard I was an orphan who had gotten into medical school on my own merit, he immediately decided that Xia Yunjing should date me. He said this girl had backbone, that she was worthy of the Xia family. For the 5 years after that, Xia Changfeng truly treated me like his own granddaughter. He called every holiday, personally ordered a birthday cake for me at the hospital, and always urged Xia Yunjing to hurry up and get the marriage certificate. But after 5 years of urging, Xia Yunjing got the certificate with someone else. I said, Xia Yunjing, listen carefully, I can't help with your grandfather's illness, and I don't want to. Whether you chartered a plane to come here or knelt down below, I'm not going back with you today. He panicked. In 3 quick steps, he rushed into the hotel lobby, and within 2 minutes, he was at my door. The door panel shook under his pounding fists. When Qinglan, open up, if you don't come back with me, I'm not leaving. I leaned against the wall in the entryway, not moving. Through the door, I said, stand there as long as you like. It's -10 degrees Celsius in Iceland at night. You're not dressed warmly enough. Don't freeze to death and make me have to revive you. There was silence for a few seconds, then the sound of him punching the door again. Can't you just soften up once, just once? I walked over, pulled the door open a crack, and looked at his flushed face. Soften up, I said. When you wanted me to soften up, you were rolling around in bed with Louis, weren't you? Xia Yunjing, I'm not your spare tire. With that, I slammed the door shut. There were a few more thuds against the door from outside, then the sound of footsteps fading away. I walked back to the balcony and looked out. Xia Yunjing was standing in the snow in front of the hotel, head down, on the phone. The wind lifted his shirt collar, and he shivered as he spoke to someone. After about 10 minutes, he hung up, looked up in my direction, then turned and walked toward the parking lot. His car started quickly, its headlights flashing briefly in the snow before it drove off toward the highway. I retreated back into the room, picked up my phone, and turned it on. Dr. Chen's messages piled up by the hundreds. The last one, sent half an hour ago, read, Sister Wen, Xiao Xia chartered a plane to find you. The old man's heart stopped once just now. Beijing specialists used defibrillation to bring him back, but no one dares to operate. Old Mrs. Xia is nearly in tears. I replied, what's the old man's condition now? Dr. Chen responded instantly, heart rate in the 80s. Blood pressure unstable. He won't make it through tomorrow. Sister Wen, are you really not coming back? I stared at the message for a long time, then I typed, I'll think about it. After sending that, I turned the phone off again and lay back down on the balcony lounge chair. The aurora still drifted in the sky, its colors deeper than before. I closed my eyes, and in my mind, one thing kept turning over and over. The night sky above Iceland was a canvas of shifting green and purple, the aurora dancing like a living thing. I lay on the bed in that small Vic guest house, my mind Churning with thoughts that refused to settle. Xia Changfeng, he couldn't die, that was a fact I couldn't ignore. He had been good to me, truly good, in a way that cut through the coldness of our family's history. But if I just went back, performed the surgery for Xia Yinjing, and then what? He would continue living his life with Lu Yi, and I would remain the on-call backup doctor, summoned whenever he needed me. No. That resentment burned in my chest, a fire I couldn't extinguish. I couldn't swallow that bitterness. I opened my eyes, staring up at the aurora overhead, and a slow smile spread across my lips. Lu Beichen, no, Xia Yinjing, since you've come all the way to Iceland, don't think you can drag me back so easily. I can perform the surgery, but the conditions will be mine to set. I picked up my phone, powered it back on, and sent a message to Dr. Chen. Tell Xia Yinjing that tomorrow morning at 8, I will call him, tell him to wait. After sending that, I placed the phone on the small table beside me, pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, it would be his turn to kneel and listen to what I had to say. Chapter 4, The Call at the Operating Room Door. At 7 in the morning, Iceland time, I woke up. The aurora had long since faded, replaced by a gray-blue morning light that painted the snow outside with a soft pink hue. I washed up, changed into fresh clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. I powered it on, watching the signal bars crawl up one by one. A torrent of messages flooded in, but I ignored them all, scrolling directly to Xia Yinjing's number and pressing dial. It rang once before he answered. Qinglan, his voice was hoarse, like sandpaper scraping against iron. You finally called. Where are you? I searched for you half the night. That hotel front desk said you'd moved somewhere else. I'm at another guest house in Vic, about 15 kilometers from the hotel you stayed at last night. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Xia Yinjing, listen carefully. I'm going to lay out my terms now. There was a second of quiet on his end, then he said, go ahead, whatever it is, I'll agree. First, I said, my voice steady, you return to China immediately. Go wait outside the operating room at Renai Hospital. I will remotely guide Dr. Chen through the bypass surgery. He panicked instantly. Remotely? You can't come back yourself. Let me finish. I interrupted. Second, you make Lu Yi move out of the Xia family mansion. She is never to appear in front of me again. A heavy silence fell over the line. 2 seconds passed before he spoke. She's pregnant. That's your problem. Did you think about that when you married her? Third, I continued, after your grandfather's surgery is complete, you will hold a press conference and personally announce that you were the one who betrayed me first, and that the dissolution of our engagement is your fault. Qinglan. Fourth, I said, delivering the final blow, you will tear up your marriage certificate in front of all the media. The line went completely dead. I could hear his breathing grow heavy, labored, like he couldn't catch his breath. About 10 seconds later, he finally spoke. What good does tearing up the certificate do? Legally, we're still, handle the legalities slowly with a divorce, but you will tear that paper in front of everyone. I let the words hang in the air. This is the price for my surgery. Xia Yinjing, you choose. Another long silence. I heard someone in the background shouting, Mr. Xia, his heart rate is dropping again. It was probably Dr. Chen's voice from the hospital. Then he said, fine, I agree. Just get Dr. Chen to start now. I replied, you get on the plane first. Only when you land in China will I begin the operation. Qinglan, you son of a, Xia Yinjing. I called his name, cutting him off. Do you have time to argue with me? A heavy gasp came through the phone, followed by a dull thud, like something had been thrown to the ground. A few seconds later, his voice returned, I'm going to the airport now. When Qinglan, you better make sure grandfather is fine. If you obediently complete the first 3 conditions, the 4th will naturally follow. I paused. Message me when you land. I hung up and immediately dialed Dr. Chen. Old Chen, listen, I'm going to guide you through the surgery via video now. Get the operating room ready and have everyone in position. I'll be watching the entire time. Dr. Chen's voice was tight with tension. Sister Wen, you're really not coming back. Mr. Xia said he's flying back immediately, but the old man can't wait that long in the ore. That's why I'm doing it remotely. I took a breath, set up the camera. I'm calling you on video now. The moment the video connected, I saw the harsh white lights of Renai Hospital's operating room. Xia Changfeng lay on the table, his face ashen, the monitor beeping erratically with chaotic numbers. Dr. Chen stood in front of the camera, mask on, surrounded by 4 assistants, all of them radiating anxiety. Sister Wen, his heart rate dropped to 40 again. Don't panic, I said, staring at the screen. Start with the extracorporeal circulation. I'll guide you through the bypass. Change your gloves first. The last batch you mentioned had the wrong size. Don't use those, Dr. Chen froze for a moment. How did you know about the glove issue? I checked the inventory list before I left, I snapped. Stop wasting time, get to work. For the next 3 hours, I sat on the bed in that Icelandic guest house, my eyes locked on the phone screen, watching the surgical procedure unfold. Every cut, every stitch, I directed from 10,000 kilometers away. Dr. Chen had been with me for 8 years. His hands were steady, but he would hesitate whenever he hit a tricky spot. Each time he paused, I shouted through the screen, "Don't stop. Move the clamp 3 millimeters to the left. Yes, use double thread for the sutures. The old man's blood vessel walls are thin, single thread won't hold." 3 hours and 17 minutes later, the final stitch was in place. Dr. Chen looked up at the camera, his eyes above the mask bloodshot. "Sister Wen, the bypass is successful. His heart rate is stable." I leaned back against the headboard, closed my eyes, and let out a long, slow breath. "Move him to the ICU for 48 hours of observation. Send me updates if anything changes." I ended the video call and tossed my phone onto the pillow beside me, collapsing flat onto the bed, completely drained. 3 hours of non-stop tension, and my back was soaked through with sweat. My phone vibrated against the pillow. A message from Xia Yunjing landed. "Heading to the hospital now. How is grandfather?" I replied. "Surgery is done. Condition is stable for now." He responded instantly. "Thank you, Qinglan. I'll do what I promised." I stared at the words on the screen, but I didn't reply. "Xia Yunjing, you say you'll do it, but do you really think I'll wait?" I turned my phone off again and sat up in bed. Outside the window of the guest house, a vast expanse of snow-white ice fields stretched out, and in the distance, a herd of Icelandic horses ambled slowly across the snowy ground. I stood up, walked over to the window, and gazed at that immense whiteness. A plan slowly took shape in my mind. First, let Xia Yunjing publicly tear up the marriage certificate. If he did that, Louis' face would be utterly lost. Second, after he exposed the scandal, the stock price of Xia Corporation would inevitably crash. Third, he thought that was everything. What he didn't know was that on the very night he chartered a flight to Iceland, I had already sent a photo of my marriage certificate to the editor-in-chief of a financial media outlet. That person owed me a favor, and he would know exactly when to publish it. "Xia Yunjing, when you begged me, you agreed to the conditions, but you never asked me if I would still come back after you finished all this." I smiled at my reflection in the window glass. "No, I wouldn't." Chapter 5, the live stream of the certificate tearing. The domestic news exploded. That morning, I sat in a small cafe in Reykjavik, Iceland, with a cup of hot cocoa in front of me. My phone screen displayed a financial news push notification. The headline was shocking. Xia Corporation President Xia Yunjing exposed for secret marriage and registration. Fiancé Wen Qinglan fled to Iceland in anger. Patriarch critically ill without a surgeon. Beneath it were tens of thousands of comments. The top comment read, "This is scum, plain and simple." I scrolled down a few pages and saw someone digging up Louis' photo in background, claiming she was a third-tier actress who had only entered the entertainment industry 3 years ago thanks to Xia Yunjing's connections. I took a sip of my hot cocoa and kept scrolling. A second push notification popped up, an official press conference. Announcement from Xia Corporation. Today at 3 p.m., Xia Yunjing would personally hold a press conference. I checked the time. It was afternoon in China, morning here in Iceland. I calculated the time difference, put down my phone, and ordered another slice of cake. I didn't need to watch the press conference to know how it would go. I knew Xia Yunjing's temper too well. He would do what he promised. Even if he was seething with hatred inside, he hated that I forced him, but he feared even more that if the old man really died, the elders of the Xia family would drive him out. At exactly 3 p.m., I propped my phone against my coffee cup and opened the live stream link. On the screen was the lobby of Xia Corporation's headquarters. Hundreds of reporters sat below, their long lenses aimed at the table on stage. Xia Yunjing sat in the center, wearing a white shirt and black suit, his hair meticulously combed. But his complexion was terrible, dark circles under his eyes, a small crack on his lips. He raised his hand to press down on the microphone and opened with, "Today, I am holding this press conference to clarify several matters to the public." The flashbulbs below exploded in a frenzy. "First, my engagement to Miss Wen Qinglan is officially terminated as of today. All responsibility lies with me. During the engagement period, I registered for marriage with another woman. constituting a betrayal to Miss When he said the word betrayal, his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. I held my cup, watching him, my face expressionless. Second, I apologized to Miss Wen Qinglan and my grandfather, Xia Changfeng, because of my personal misconduct. My grandfather was unable to receive Miss Wen's timely medical assistance while critically ill, nearly causing a grave mistake. A reporter raised a microphone and asked, "President Xia, who is this other woman? Is it the actress Lu Yi, who was rumored to be involved with you 3 years ago?" Xia Yunjing paused, then nodded. Then he pulled a red booklet from his suit pocket and held it up to the camera. "This is my marriage certificate with Lu Yi. Today, in front of everyone, I am going to destroy it." He placed the certificate on the table and picked up a pair of scissors beside him. The moment the blades closed, the red booklet was cut from the middle, revealing the photo and the official stamp inside. Splitting in two, he cut a second time, a third time, until the red booklet was reduced to 5 or 6 pieces of shredded paper that could never be reassembled. The crowd below erupted in chaos. The flashbulbs went wild. Xia Yunjing put down the scissors and looked up at the camera. That look in his eyes, I could feel through the screen that he hated me to the bone, but he couldn't say it, because the old man had just come out of the ICU and was still lying in a hospital bed needing follow-up treatment. Without me, he couldn't find another person who could treat Xia Changfeng. He knew that better than I did. After the live stream ended, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Xia Yunjing. "I've done everything you asked. When are you coming back?" I didn't reply. He sent another. "Wen Qinglan, what about the 4th thing you promised me? Come back. Grandfather said he wants to see you." I still didn't reply. Then his phone call came through. I picked up, but didn't speak. His voice was hoarse on the other end. "Where are you?" Grandfather woke up, and his first words were asking about you. "Even if you hate me, can't you at least come back to see him?" "I'm glad he woke up," I said. "Xia Yunjing, I finished the surgery I promised you. You did what you promised me. We're even." There was a few seconds of silence on the line. Then he said, "What do you mean, even? You're not coming back." "I'm not coming back," I said. "I'm in Iceland. It's fine here." "Wen Qinglan, be reasonable." I tore up the marriage certificate, held the press conference. "The whole world knows I wronged you. What more do you want?" I stood up, coffee cup in hand, and walked to the window. Outside, on the streets of Reykjavik, someone was walking a dog. In the distance were colorful roofed little houses and a church spire. I said, "Xia Yunjing, you tore up the marriage certificate, so I have to go back with you. The day you married Lu Yi, why didn't you tear it up? When you held her in your arms and slept, why didn't you think of me? Now that I've saved your grandfather for you, you think this is over. Then what do you want me to do?" His voice began to tremble. "Kneel for you, whether you kneel or not. I don't care anymore," I said. "Xia Yunjing, in these 5 years, how many things I've covered for you. You know it in your heart. When your company's capital chain broke, who found the investment? When your grandfather had that surgery 3 years ago, who stood for 12 hours straight without stepping down? Now you want to talk reason with me. What right do you have?" On the phone, he couldn't say a single word. "All right," I said, hanging up the phone. "Take good care of your grandfather, and that child in your wife's belly. You take good care of that too." I slipped the phone into my pocket, paid the bill, and walked out of the cafe. The sunlight in Iceland was thin, casting a warm, gentle glow on my skin. I strolled slowly along the street, taking in the colorful houses on either side and the Icelandic sweaters displayed in shop windows. At the corner of the intersection ahead, a man stood there, blonde hair, blue eyes, tall, wearing a dark blue down jacket. His head bowed as he looked at his phone. As I passed by, he lifted his gaze, and when he saw me, he froze for a moment. Then he smiled and waved at me. "One," he said, "what are you doing here?" I looked at him and smiled back. "Long time no see, Eric." Chapter 6, Reunion of Old Friends. Eric was an Icelandic doctor I'd met during my graduate studies at an academic conference. His full name was Eric Johansson, and back then, he was a visiting scholar at the Karolinska Institute. We'd collaborated on a paper about cardiovascular interventions. After that, he returned to Iceland, and we never saw each other again. Do the math. 6 years had passed. He walked over, studying me for a long moment, then spoke in Chinese with an accent. "You look different, thinner than before. You've changed too," I replied. "What are you doing here?" "I'm the deputy director of cardiology at Reykjavik Hospital," he said, pointing to a gray building not far away. I work over there. I came out to grab coffee just now, and I spotted you from a distance. He invited me to a cafe next to the hospital. We sat across from each other, and he ordered me a glass of Icelandic spiced wine. I gave him a rough outline of why I'd come to Iceland, nothing too detailed, just that I'd called off an engagement and needed to get away. When I finished, the smile in Eric's blue eyes faded slightly. That person wasn't worthy of you, he said. Bluntly, the one I know isn't someone who gets broken by things like this. I held up my glass and smiled faintly. Indeed, it didn't break me, he nodded. If you need anything, just reach out. Iceland's small. Where are you staying? Vik Town. That's too far, he frowned. Why are you staying in such a remote place alone? Reykjavik has heating and people. I have an apartment by the sea that's empty. If you don't mind, you can stay there. I said there was no need, that I'd already booked a guest house. He didn't insist, just gave me his number and told me to call anytime. By the time we left the cafe, the sky had darkened, streetlights flickered on, and the streets were nearly empty. I walked along the shoreline for a while, the wind blowing in from the Atlantic, carrying a salty, briny scent. My phone buzzed incessantly. Sia called 5 times, and I declined every one. The 6th call was from old Madame Sia. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice trembled over the line. Chinglon, are you still in Iceland? That boy Yunjin came back just now, furious. He smashed up his study. What happened between you two? I only just found out about the marriage certificate. Don't worry, Grandma is on your side. Auntie Sia, I interrupted. Take care of yourself. Grandpa just had surgery and needs looking after. When are you coming back? I'm not coming back for now. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a heavy sigh. Grandma knows you've been wronged. I had the housekeeper throw out all of Louie's things. She was crying and carrying on, saying she was pregnant with Yunjing's child. I told her it doesn't matter. The only granddaughter-in-law our Sia family recognizes is you. I stared at the shimmering lights dancing on the sea surface, and suddenly my nose stung, but I held it together. Grandma, thank you, but Sia Yunjing and I can't go back. He made his choice, and he has to take responsibility for it. Chinglon, take care of yourself. If Grandpa has any issues, have Dr. Chen contact me directly. After hanging up, I sat on a bench by the shore for a while. The wind was fierce, whipping my hair into a tangled mess across my face. I tucked it behind my ears and gazed at the gray-blue line where the sea met the sky. Let the mess at the Sia family sort itself out. The next morning, I checked out of the guest house in Vik and moved into Eric's seaside apartment. It wasn't large, but the floor-to-ceiling windows faced the ocean, and every morning I could watch the sun leap up from the water's surface. On the 3rd night I stayed there, the doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole and saw Sia Yunjing. He was back. This time, he was dressed a bit more neatly, his down jacket zipped up, his hair combed, but the bloodshot veins in his eyes were worse than before, like he hadn't slept in 3 days. I opened the door, leaning against the frame as I looked at him. How did you find this place? I checked your credit card records. You changed your accommodation in Reykjavik, he said. Chinglon, I just need a few words with you, and I'll leave. I stepped aside to let him in. He didn't sit down, just stood in the entryway, staring at my luggage in the living room. The suitcase wasn't fully unpacked yet. A few clothes hung over the back of a chair. How long do you plan to stay? He asked. I don't know. He was silent for a moment, then pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me. I took it and saw it was a divorce agreement signed by Louis. The lawyer sent it over yesterday, he said. She signed it. As for the pregnancy, I lied to you. She wasn't pregnant. I was afraid you wouldn't save her, so I made up the story. I stared at the signature on the paper, and a bitter laugh escaped me. Sia Yunjing, you even lied to me about Louis being pregnant. His face paled. I was afraid you wouldn't do the surgery. So from start to finish, you were lying to me. The marriage certificate was real. The wedding was real, only the pregnancy was fake. Do you think I'll forgive you for that? He stepped forward, reaching for my hand. I stepped back, and his hand caught empty air. Chinglon, I know I was wrong. Come back, we'll make up the wedding right away. You can punish me however you want. Punish you? I looked at him. Sia Yunjing, do you still think I'm just throwing a tantrum? I'm breaking up with you? He jerked his head up to look at me, the blood vessels in his eyes bulging as if they might burst. Break up. When Chinglon, listen to me carefully. You will enter the Sia family's door whether you want to or not. Grandpa has already made it clear. The only granddaughter-in-law is you. I've dealt with Louis cleanly. What else are you unsatisfied with? I smiled. You dealing with her is your business. Me not going back is mine. When Chinglon, his voice shot up abruptly, and he took a whole step forward. closing the distance between us. You've been with me for 5 years. And you're just throwing it away like that when you went to get the marriage certificate with someone else. Did you ask me? That question choked him so badly he couldn't get a single word out. We stood there facing each other, the living room so quiet you could hear the sound of the waves outside the window. After a long pause, he spoke. You really won't come with me? I won't. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and strode toward the door. It was yanked open and slammed shut, with a bang that rattled the picture frames on the wall twice. I stood there without moving, then slowly walked over to lock the door. Leaning against the door panel, I let out a long, heavy breath. My phone chimed, a message from Dr. Chin. Sister Win, the old man's condition has improved. They removed the breathing tube today. His spirits are good. I replied, got it. Thank him for me, please. After sending that, I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The moonlight on the sea shattered into a sheet of silver white, so bright it made your eyes dizzy. Out on the distant highway beyond the window, the taillights of a car were moving toward the city center. Xie Yunjing was gone, but I knew he wouldn't give up. Chapter 7, Chain of Exposés. On the 4th day after Xie Yunjing left, the domestic news exploded again. This time, it hit even harder than before. When I scrolled through my phone that morning, the headline on the finance section had already changed to, Xie Group CEO's secret marriage target allegedly uses pregnancy to force marriage. Recording leaked. I clicked in and found a 3-minute recording. Louis's voice was syrupy sweet. Yunjing, if you don't get the marriage certificate with me, I'll just abort the baby. Anyway, Auntie said if I don't have a title in this belly, she won't let me into the Xie family's door. Below it was a text transcript of the audio, with timestamps for every line. The outlet that published it was that financial media company, the same one I'd sent the marriage certificate photo to. They not only released the recording but also posted a screenshot of a chat between Louis and old Madame Xie. In the screenshot, old Madame Xie said, "You're carrying our Xie family's seed. Yunjing will take responsibility for you." The commentary below read, "The legitimate wife, when Qinglan, was kept in the dark for 5 years. The mistress used a fake pregnancy to climb up. When the old man was critically ill, the legitimate wife still provided remote medical aid. Good and evil will eventually be repaid." After I finished reading that article, I sent a message to the editor-in-chief of that financial media outlet. "Where did the recording come from?" He replied quickly, "It was sent to the newsroom in an anonymous package. There were a few photos inside too. Want them?" "What photos?" A few seconds later, he sent 3. The first was Xie Yunjing and Louis kissing in a bar, arms wrapped around each other's waists, the timestamp showing it was half a year ago. The second was Louis sitting alone in a hospital corridor crying, clutching a piece of paper that was blurred out. The third was the most explosive, a screenshot of a chat between Louis and a man. "Don't worry about the kid, I'll handle Xie Yunjing, you just go cry in front of him." I zoomed in on that screenshot and saw the man's avatar was a side profile. The face shape looked familiar. I zoomed in a little more, and the outline of the profile started to look more and more like one of Xie Yunjing's friends, Zhou Mingyuan. So even the child wasn't Xie Yunjing's. I put down my phone, leaned back on the sofa, and laughed for a long time. After I finished laughing, I picked it up again and sent the editor-in-chief a message. "That third photo, did you check who that man is?" "We did," he replied, "but we're not planning to release it for now. We'll save this one for a critical moment." I didn't press further. He was an old friend of mine. He knew when to drop what bombshell. That night, Xie Yunjing called me 18 times. I didn't answer a single one. The 19th call was from old Madame Xie, and I picked up. Her voice was on the verge of tears. "Qinglan, have you seen the news? That Louis, the child in her belly, isn't Yunjing's. Our family was played by that woman. Yunjing destroyed the engagement for her, and it turns out the child belongs to someone else." "Grandma, please don't get worked up. Your blood pressure is high. How can I not get worked up?" Her voice trembled. "Yunjing has locked himself in his office all day and hasn't come out. The company is swarmed with reporters outside. The stock has dropped over 20%, and the board members are in an uproar. Qinglan, please help him. Grandma is begging you." I was silent for a moment. "Grandma, when he went to get the marriage certificate back then, if he had just told me one word, I wouldn't have stopped him. It was his own choice, but he chose wrong, and now he has to bear the consequences himself. I can't go back and clean up his mess anymore." Old Madame Xie cried on the phone. I listened to her sobs, and a heavy feeling settled in my chest, but I didn't change my answer. After hanging up, I sat on the sofa and stared at the sea outside the window. The moon had risen, casting a shimmering silver light across the water. My phone vibrated again. Eric sent a message. Tomorrow's the weekend. Want to go to the Golden Circle together? I'll drive. I thought about it and replied, sure. The next morning, Eric pulled up in a black SUV. The trunk was packed with a thermos and blankets. He was wearing a dark green windbreaker, his hair a little tousled by the wind, but he looked full of energy. We drove east along Route 1, passing vast stretches of black volcanic rock and green tundra on both sides. Iceland's landscape was so open it made your mind feel empty. You didn't have to think about anything, just look out the window. When we reached the Golden Waterfall, I stood on the viewing platform for a long time. The water crashed down from the heights, making the ground tremble beneath my feet. The mist caught the sunlight, forming a rainbow arching across the canyon. Eric stood beside me and handed me a cup of hot cocoa. You seem much more relaxed these past couple of days, he said. I took a sip. Yeah, getting far away from that circle makes life a lot less exhausting. He didn't ask any more questions. After we finished watching the waterfall, we headed to the geyser, watching the massive spring shoot scalding columns of water into the air every few minutes. The crowd around us was counting down the seconds and screaming, but the two of us stood at the edge, watching slowly. On the way back to Reykjavik, the sky had already darkened. Eric slowed the car down and asked me if I was hungry. I said I was fine. He glanced at the rearview mirror and suddenly said, that white car behind us has been following for several stretches. I turned to look back. At a great distance, I could see the headlights of a white sedan, but there weren't many cars on the roads in Iceland anyway. It was normal to share the same route, probably just going the same way. I said. Eric didn't respond, but he picked up the speed a bit. The white car behind us accelerated too. When we drove into the Reykjavik city center, the white car turned at an intersection and headed in another direction. Eric watched it disappear in the rearview mirror before letting out a sigh of relief. Are you sure it's not after you? He asked. I shook my head. Shouldn't be. No one knows me here. But that night, after I returned to my apartment, I stood by the window and glanced downstairs. Under the streetlight across the road, a white car was parked, the heat from its hood still not fully dissipated. I pulled the curtains shut and went back to sit in the living room. Sia, you still have people watching me in Iceland. Chapter 8, New Year's Eve in Iceland. By the time I'd been living in Iceland for 2 weeks, Sia Yunjing's phone calls had dropped from dozens a day to 2 or 3. He started sending messages, some long, some short. Sometimes it was "Oh, I miss you" send at 3 in the morning. Other times a photo of old Master Sia sitting in his hospital room reading a newspaper, looking much better than before. I read every single one. I didn't reply to a single one. That day was New Year's Eve, back home. Everywhere was decorated with lights and lanterns, but here in Iceland, it was just another ordinary workday. Still, a few red lanterns were hanging on the streets of Reykjavik, probably part of an event organized by the local Chinese community. Eric knew I was spending the holiday alone, so he'd invited me a day in advance to make dumplings at his place. His apartment was on the first floor of an old building in the city center. The living room wasn't big, but it was warm. A fire crackled in the fireplace, the wood popping and snapping. He rolled the dough, and I filled the wrappers. We worked together for most of the day. His dumplings were so ugly they were laughable, and I teased him about it several times. He didn't get angry, just smiled and said he wasn't good at this kind of fine work. Around 7 in the evening, the dumplings came out of the pot. Steam rose in a warm cloud, filling the living room with the scent of flour. Eric opened a bottle of red wine and brought out a plate of roasted lamb chops, saying it was an Icelandic tradition to eat lamb on New Year's Eve. We sat on the sofa. The TV was playing a local Icelandic New Year's program. The host was speaking Icelandic, a jumble of sounds I couldn't understand a single word of, but the atmosphere was comforting. Occasionally, the sound of fireworks exploding outside drifted in, and the distant church bells chimed twice. Eric raised his glass. To the new year. I raised mine too. To the new year. Halfway through the wine, my phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Chin Winjia. Happy New Year. Just letting you know President Sia went to the hospital again this afternoon. Old Master Sia scolded him and told him to stop bothering you. The old master said you can stay in Iceland as long as you want, and the Sia family won't short you a single cent of the compensation you're owed. I stared at the message, my nose tingling. Old Master Sia Changfeng, even at a time like this, was still protecting me. I replied, thank you, Dr. Chin. Please wish Old Master a happy new year for me, and good health. After sending I placed my phone face down on the table. Eric glanced at my phone but didn't ask who it was from. He added another log to the fire, and the flames leaped higher, casting a warm glow across the entire living room. Shouldn't you be thinking about a long-term visa? He said casually. Iceland's cardiology department has been short-staffed. If you're interested, I can put in a good word for you. I held my wine glass and thought for a moment. I am considering it, then think it through, he said. No need to rush a decision. That night, I returned to my apartment just before midnight. New Year's Eve in Iceland was very quiet. There was almost no one on the streets. As I walked back, I looked up at the sky. The clouds were thin, and the aurora borealis had appeared again, this time a faint purple, flowing slowly across the horizon. When I reached the entrance of my apartment building, I stopped. Someone was sitting on the steps, a man in a suit, wrapped in a black down jacket, his hair a mess plastered to his forehead, his whole body curled up like a stray cat soaked through by rain. He saw me approaching and slowly stood up. His body was radiating cold, his lips purple from the chill. You're here again, I said. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed, his voice hoarse beyond recognition. Qinglong, today the board voted to remove me as president. That bastard Zhou Mingyuan. The child Louis is carrying is his. He set me up like this, and now he's taking my position. I didn't say anything. I stood 2 steps away, watching him. I have nothing left, he said. Grandpa won't talk to me. The company doesn't want me. Louis ran away. My mom cries at home every day, saying I've ruined the entire Xia family. He took a step forward, reaching out to touch my arm. I stepped back. Qinglong, his voice cracked with tears. Only now do I realize how much you shielded me from over these 5 years. After you left, everything fell apart. I couldn't control the board, no one could fill the holes in the project accounts, and when Grandpa was hospitalized, there was no one to lean on. I can't do this without you. I looked at him, this wreck of a man. A storm of emotions churned inside me, hatred, satisfaction, and a faint, inexplicable bitterness, but not a trace of weakness. Xia, I said, you're telling me now that you can't do without me. But when you went to get the marriage certificate with Louis, did you ever think about what you'd do without me? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. You did think about it, I said for him. You thought that even if I found out, you could coax me back. After all, when Qinglong couldn't live without you, right? He lowered his head, his shoulders trembling as if he were crying. Now let me make this clear, I said, staring at the crown of his head. I can live without you, and I'll live better than you. You can come find me 100 times, and I'll still say the same thing. He jerked his head up, his face streaked with tears glistening under the street lamp. Then what's going on between you and that Icelandic guy? I saw you sightseeing with him, going to his place for dinner. That's my business, I said, none of yours. He reached out and grabbed my wrist, his grip fierce, squeezing until my bones ached. I tried to pull free but couldn't. When Qinglong, what right do you have? I divorced my wife for you, tore up the marriage certificate, held a press conference to apologize to you, lost my company, and you just brush me off with my business. I looked down at his hand, then slowly raised my other hand, prying his fingers off one by one. Because you deserve it. I pulled my hand back and stepped away. Xia, go back. Iceland's too cold. Don't freeze to death here, or your family will come after me again. I turned and walked toward the apartment building entrance. He shouted after me. When Qinglong, aren't you afraid I'll really die right in front of you? I didn't look back. That's your business. As the door clicked shut behind me, I heard him punch the wall outside, a dull thud, then the sound of something sliding down, probably him slumping against the wall to the ground. I leaned against the door for a moment, eyes closed, then changed my shoes and walked to the window to look down. He was sitting on the steps, head buried between his knees, shoulders shaking. I pulled the curtains shut. Chapter 9, the final cut. Xia sat at the base of the apartment building the entire night. When I pulled back the curtains the next morning, he was still there, his down jacket coated in a thin layer of frost, his whole body curled into a tiny ball, head drooping as if asleep. I didn't go down. About half an hour later, a cleaner drove by on a small cleaning cart, mistaking him for a homeless man. The cleaner poked him lightly with a broom. He jerked his head up, his face covered in red marks from the cold, his eyes swollen into slits. He stood up, tilted his head to look up at my direction, behind the curtains. I didn't move, but he must have known I was watching. He stood there for a long time, then he turned and walked away. After that day, Xie Yunjin didn't show up again. I thought he'd finally given up, until 3 days later, when Dr. Chen called me. Sister Wen, Dr. Chen's voice was tight. The old man went into emergency again this morning. It's worse than last time. Heart rate dropped to the 20s. Now he's on a ventilator. President Xie couldn't find you, so... He called me. He said if you don't come back, he'll hand over the records of that private surgery you did years ago to the health commission. My hand gripping the phone clenched hard. That private surgery was 3 years ago. A little leukemia patient had waited 6 months for a matching donor with no luck, so I secretly helped him arrange surgery through overseas channels behind the hospital's back. If that came to light, my medical license would be revoked. Where is he? Renai Hospital. He's right outside the emergency room, with old Mrs. Xie too, Sister Wen. This time it's really bad. The old man might not make it through today. I hung up the phone and stood there, thinking for a full 3 minutes. Eric happened to be at my place borrowing books that day. He heard the conversation and walked out of the study, looking at me. You're going back. The old man is dying. I have to go. That man threatened you with the files. I know. I said, but I can't gamble with the old man's life. Eric looked at me, his blue eyes filled with heavy concern. He walked over and patted my shoulder. I'll go with you. I froze for a moment. You're coming too. I've flown international rescue missions, he said. In this situation, an extra doctor means an extra hand. Besides, I'm not comfortable with you going back alone. I didn't refuse. 3 hours later, we were sitting on the flight from Reykjavik to China. As the plane took off, I closed my eyes, my mind churning with Xie Yunjing's threat. He'd stooped to this just to force me back. Fine, I'd go back, but I wasn't going back for him. I was going for the old man. After I saved him, I'd deliver the final cut myself. The plane landed at 2 in the morning local time. Dr. Chen had sent a car to pick me up at the airport. Eric followed me into the car. We sped straight to Renai Hospital, and I rushed into the emergency room still wearing the clothes from the flight. When Xie Yunjing saw me, his face was a mix of shock, joy, and fear. He reached out to stop me, but I shoved him aside. Get out of my way. In the emergency room, Xie Changfeng lay on the table, much thinner than last time, his face covered by a breathing mask. The monitor's numbers flickered weakly. Slowly, I stepped forward to check his pupils. Half of them were already dilated. Dr. Chen, start defibrillation. For the next 4 hours, Eric and I took turns. Eric's movements were sharp, and our coordination barely needed words. We performed a second bypass repair, stitching up a side branch vessel lesion missed during the first surgery. As dawn broke, the monitor's heart rate climbed back into a stable range. I pulled off my gloves and slumped against the corner of the operating room. Sitting down against the wall, Eric handed me a cup of water, and I drank half of it in one gulp. A knock came from outside. Xie Yunjing's voice filtered through the door. Qinglan, how's Grandpa? I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it to face him. The old man is saved, I said, but our accounts need settling. The joy on his face hadn't fully formed before it froze. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and brought up the screenshot the finance editor had sent me earlier, the chat log between Lu Yi and Zhou Mingyuan, clearly laying out the fake pregnancy scheme. I held the screen up for him to see. Xie Yunjing, you were played from start to finish by Zhou Mingyuan and Lu Yi. That child isn't yours. It was a setup they cooked up together. You threw away 5 years of our relationship for a lie. He stared at the words on the screen, the color draining from his face bit by bit. His lips trembled for a long time before he finally choked out. Where did you get this screenshot? Don't worry about where I got it. I put my phone away. Now you know the truth, but it's too late. I stepped around him and walked out. Behind me, his voice rang out. When Qinglan, where are you going? I didn't turn my head. When you threatened me with that file, you should have known that since I dared to come back, I must be holding something in my hand that scares you even more than that file ever could. At the end of the corridor, Eric stood waiting for me. He wore a white coat the hospital had lent him temporarily, his blue eyes blazing under the lights. I walked up to him and said, "Let's go." He nodded and fell into step beside me as we headed out. From behind came Xie Yunjing's hysterical shouts, followed by old Madame Xia's crying, a chaotic mess. I didn't look back. When the elevator doors slid shut, I stared at my own reflection in the polished surface. My eyes were bright, the corners of my mouth slightly lifted. Xie Yunjing, you thought you won, but really, you lost the most completely. Chapter 10, A New Life Under the Northern Lights. On the third day after the old man was discharged from the hospital, I was packing my suitcase in the hotel room. Eric sat on the sofa, flipping through an Icelandic novel, occasionally glancing up at the window. Outside, the sky was a deep blue, sunlight flooding the entire room. My phone lay on the nightstand, screen down. It had been off for 3 days now. Ever since that day at the hospital, I hadn't turned it back on. Whether Xia Yinjing had tried to find me or old Madame Xia had called, I didn't know. I knew nothing, and I didn't want to know anymore. Eric closed the book and watched me zip up the suitcase. Where to? Back to Iceland. I've already asked about the long-term visa for you, he said, standing and walking to the window. Your qualifications at the hospital are more than enough. Once the paperwork is submitted, it should be approved in a month or two. I lifted the suitcase off the bed, set it upright against the wall, and walked over to stand beside him. Outside the window was the city's skyline, a thin layer of golden clouds at the edge of the sky beyond the buildings. Thank you, Eric. He turned to look at me, then suddenly leaned in closer. We were only a few centimeters apart, and I could smell the faint, clean scent of laundry detergent on him. He reached out and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his movement light. Then he smiled. What are you thanking me for? I never thanked you when you helped me revise my thesis back then. I smiled too. That afternoon, we checked out and headed to the airport. As the taxi drove onto the airport expressway, I suddenly noticed a black sedan in the rearview mirror, tailing us closely, so close that I could see the tense line of the driver's jaw. Xia Yinjing, he had come chasing again. I turned to the driver and said, Sir, take a left at the next intersection, use another route. The driver turned the wheel. The black car behind us also swerved sharply to follow. The two vehicles chased each other on the expressway. The driver cursed, stomping on the accelerator. Eric glanced back, then patted the back of my hand. It's okay. He won't catch us. The car finally shook off the black sedan in a roar of engine noise, pulling up to the terminal entrance. As I stepped out with my suitcase, I saw the black car on the distant ramp being stopped by a police car, its red and blue lights flashing blindingly. Eric looked at it. You called the police in advance? Yeah, I said. I timed it. We entered the terminal, checked in, and passed through security. At the boarding gate, the seats were full, people holding selfie sticks to record videos, others flipping through travel guides. I sat by the window and turned on my phone for a glance. Over 600 missed calls, more than 500 text messages, most from the same number. I scrolled to the last few. Xia Yinjing's, Qinglan, are you really leaving? I've been looking for you for 3 days, and you had your phone off. Do you know how worried I was? That file, I won't submit it. I was lying. Come back, please. Grandfather talks about you every day. I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. The last one was sent last night. Just 6 words. When Qinglan, I love you. I stared at those 6 words and let out a soft laugh. Love. Had he ever loved me? Maybe, but that love was too little, too light, couldn't withstand any woman's seduction, couldn't bear even a hint of scheming. What he loved was just the tool that had shielded him from the wind and rain for 5 years. When the tool became useless, he swapped it for another. Now that the tool had run away, he came shouting about love. I deleted that message, then blocked his number. When the boarding announcement sounded, I stood up and walked toward the gate. Eric followed behind me, carrying my thick down jacket. As I crossed the jet bridge and stepped into the cabin, sunlight streamed through the porthole windows, casting my shadow long on the floor. I found my window seat, sat down, fastened my seatbelt, and turned to look outside. Iceland, here I come. This time, I'm going back, not escaping. As the plane took off, Xia Yunjing was probably still sitting in the airport police station. His car had been stopped for reckless driving, enough to keep him busy for a whole day. By the time he got out, I'd already be above the clouds. More than a dozen hours later, the plane landed at Reykjavik airport. This time, I didn't look at my phone, didn't check the news from home. When I walked out of the arrivals hall, the cold wind hit my face, and the sky was so blue it looked washed clean. Eric drove to pick me up. I climbed into the passenger seat, and he asked where I wanted to go first. Vic, I said, I want to see the northern lights. He smiled and started the car. The car drove along the glacial highway, with endless white stretching out on both sides. The sun was setting, the sky burning into a fiery orange at the edge. In the distance, a few horses stood in the snow, their manes blowing in the wind. By the time we reached the Northern Lights Hotel in Vic, it was completely dark. The front desk clerk was still the same Icelandic girl from last time. She looked at me, startled for a moment, then smiled. "Madam, you're back again." I smiled too. "Yes, I'm staying again." The room was the same one as before, with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the glacier and the sea. I set down my luggage and walked out onto the balcony. The blanket was still the same gray one the hotel provided. I draped it over my shoulders and sat down on the lounge chair. Eric didn't stay at the hotel. He said he'd drive back to Reykjavik and come see me tomorrow morning. Before he left, he stood at the doorway, looking at me as if he wanted to say something, but hesitated. Finally, he just said, "Get some good rest." After he left, I sat alone on the balcony, waiting. I waited for about half an hour, then the aurora came. This time it was a deep, vivid emerald green, rising straight up from the horizon like a colossal curtain of light, flooding half the sky. The ribbons of color flowed and curled, occasionally revealing edges of violet. The stars overhead were dimmed into insignificance, leaving only that expanse of green light between heaven and earth. I tilted my head back, gazing up at that light, and suddenly remembered the last message Xia Yinjing had sent me the day I left. "When Qinglan, I love you." I closed my eyes. The glow of the aurora seeped through my eyelids, warm and soft. Love or not, it didn't matter anymore. From now on, I would only love myself. Beneath the aurora, I sat alone, my phone lying quietly in my pocket. No calls from Xia Yinjing, no news from the Xia family, nothing to trouble me. I opened my eyes, looked at that light, and slowly smiled. Iceland was wonderful, being alone was wonderful. Side story, the aurora promise. 3 months later, in Reykjavik, spring arrived much later than in China. The ice outside the window of my seaside apartment hadn't fully melted yet, but the sunlight had grown generous, warming the windowsill for hours each day. I had lined up a row of small flower pots on the sill, hardy Icelandic plants bought from the supermarket that thrived in the cold. After half a month, they were looking lively. Last month, Eric had helped me sort out all the paperwork for my work visa. The Department of Cardiology at the National Hospital of Reykjavik had sent me an offer. Deputy Chief Physician, primarily responsible for cardiovascular interventions and post-surgery rehabilitation guidance. On my first day reporting for duty, the department head gave me a tour of the ward. The walls of the hallway were covered with department rules in Icelandic. I couldn't recognize a single word. Relying entirely on Eric to translate sentence by sentence beside me, the head was an old man with graying hair, his English thick with an accent. He smiled warmly and patted me on the shoulder. "I've heard all about you from Eric, guiding a bypass surgery remotely all by yourself. That's impressive. From now on, our heart patients are in good hands." I smiled and said thank you. On my first day, the head nurse handed me a white uniform embroidered with my name, with a line of small Icelandic text underneath. I asked Eric what it meant. He glanced at it, scratched his head a little sheepishly, and said, "Light of Iceland. The nurses gave you that nickname themselves." I looked down at those small letters, feeling both warm and amused. Work was more fulfilling than I had imagined. Icelanders were very orderly about seeing doctors, appointments and queues, rarely cutting in line, with surgery schedules clear and transparent. I started at 8 every morning and finished at 4 sharp. Without having to be on standby for emergencies or handle late-night crises for someone's elderly relative. After work, I would walk along the coast back to my apartment. Sometimes Eric would swing by to pick me up, and we'd circle the small lake in the city center. He'd tell me Icelandic myths and legends, and I'd translate medical journals I'd brought from China for him. Life was as calm as the waters of Reykjavik's harbor. Until that Tuesday afternoon, I had just finished seeing my last patient. In the consultation room when Nurse Kate knocked and poked her head in, a referral file just came in, from the University Hospital of Iceland. They're recommending a patient with a heart valve issue. They'd like you to take a look. I took the file and flipped through a couple of pages. The patient's name on the first page read Xia Changfeng, age 68, diagnosis, aortic valve stenosis with mild regurgitation. My hand paused. Xia Changfeng, why had the old man come all the way to Iceland? I flipped further. On the second page was a referral letter. At the bottom, besides the signature of the doctor from the University Hospital of Iceland, there was another signature, Xia Yinjing. I stared at those 3 characters for a few seconds, then closed the file and placed it on the desk. Kate, when is this patient arriving? The day after tomorrow, at 10 in the morning. I nodded. Got it. That evening, Eric came to my apartment for dinner. I made tomato beef noodles. He sat across the table, eating while glancing at me several times, until he finally couldn't hold it in. "You have something on your mind today?" I put down my chopsticks. Old Mr. Sia has been transferred to Iceland. He's coming to my consultation room the day after tomorrow. Eric set down his bowl. Sia Yinjing's grandfather. Yeah, what's he doing here? Heart valve issue, not a particularly serious condition. The University Hospital of Iceland could handle it perfectly well. I paused, but he specifically transferred to the National Hospital, to my department. He's not here for the medical treatment, he's here to see me. Eric was silent for a moment, then picked up his bowl and took a sip of soup. The day after tomorrow, I'll come with you for the consultation. I looked at him, his blue eyes were calm, no jealousy, no tension, just that steady certainty of I'm with you. I smiled, all right, 2 days later. At exactly 10 in the morning, I sat in the consultation room, waiting. When the nurse pushed open the door, a wheelchair came in first, and it sat Xie Changfeng. The old man looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him, but his spirit was still there. He wore a dark gray cashmere coat, with a plaid blanket draped over his knees. When he saw me, his clouded eyes brightened. Qinglan, his voice trembled slightly. I stood up and walked over, crouching in front of the wheelchair to take his hand. Grandpa Xia, why did you come all this way? Before the old man could answer, another figure stepped into the consultation room. Xie Yunjing stood there, dressed in a sharp suit, his hair cut short, his chin cleanly shaven, but compared to 3 months ago, he looked far more subdued. The arrogance in his brows and eyes was gone, replaced by a cautious, tentative air. He looked at me, his lips moving, and finally managed just one word, Qinglan. I didn't look at him. Instead, I turned to the nurse. Kate, could you please take Grandpa Xia to the next room? For the examination, I need to discuss the situation with the family. Kate wheeled the old man out. The consultation room was left with just me and Xie Yinjing. He stood by the door, not moving. I looked into his eyes and said, have a seat. He sat down in the chair across from me, both hands resting on his knees, his fingertips curling slightly. I leaned against the edge of the desk, watching him. Xie Yinjing, what exactly do you want by coming to Iceland? Grandfather really does need medical treatment, he said, his voice much lower than before, carrying a tone of resignation. The doctors back home recommended surgery for his valve problem, but he insisted on coming to you. The valve surgery can be done domestically just as well. He said it's different. Xie Yunjing lifted his head to look at me. He said you pulled his life back, and he only trusts you with the rest of it. I didn't respond. The consultation room fell silent for a moment. Then, out of nowhere, he pulled an envelope from the inner pocket of his suit jacket and placed it on the desk, sliding it toward me. What's this? Your file, he said. All the materials from the private surgery 3 years ago, the originals. I brought them. You handle them yourself. I looked down at the envelope but didn't open it. You don't need to bribe me with this. I know, he said. I'm not asking for anything. It's just keeping this stuff with me. It weighs on my conscience. I reached out, picked up the envelope, and put it into the drawer. Then I looked at his face. Xie Yunjing, you've lost weight. He froze for a moment, probably not expecting me to say something like that. He nodded. Work's been busy. Then go back and be busy. Leave your father in Iceland for treatment. I'll handle his surgery. No slacking. You don't need to stay here and keep vigil. He snapped his head up to look at me. Qinglan, don't say anything. I cut him off. I'm doing well here. Work is smooth. Life is quiet. You came, and I welcomed you bringing your father for treatment. As for anything else, you'd better drop those thoughts early. He sat in the chair, his face cycling through pale and red, his lips pressed together for a long time before he spoke. I heard you're with that Icelandic doctor. That's my business. When Qinglan, his voice suddenly tightened, you've been with him for 3 months. Is it really that much better than the 5 years you had with me? Looking at him like this, I suddenly felt I had to say what needed to be said. Clearly and completely. Xie Yunjing, I was with you for 5 years. In those 5 years, how many burdens did I carry for you? When your company was in trouble, I came down from the operating table in the middle of the night to help you negotiate investments. When your father was sick, I stood for 12 straight hours performing surgery. Afterward, I could barely stand. And you, what did you do? You got a marriage license with Louis. You lied to me, saying she was pregnant. You threatened me with my file to make me come back and save your father's life. He sat there, unable to utter a single word. Eric is different. He doesn't make me carry anything for him. When I work overtime, he brings me food. When I'm tired, he walks with me. I don't have to guess if he's hiding something from me today. I don't have to get a call in the middle of the night to clean up another mess. After I said all this, I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Reykjavik's sky was a gray, and a few seabirds were flying over the bay. Take your father for proper treatment. I'll do the surgery, you can rest assured. After it's done, you both go back, don't come again. I turned to face him. Xiaoyinjing, I really did want to marry you once, but now, I don't want to live that kind of life anymore. He sat in the chair, his shoulders slowly sagging, that angular face crumpled into a mess. His eyes were red, but he held back the tears, refusing to let them fall. After a long time, he stood up. When he reached the door, he paused, his back to me, and asked, "Is there really nothing left of me in your heart?" I looked at his back and let out a single word, "No." He pushed the door open and walked out. After the door closed, I leaned against the window and let out a long, heavy breath. My phone buzzed. It was Eric, sending a photo of the fish fillet he'd eaten in the cafeteria at lunch. The caption read, "Today's lunch isn't as good as what you make." I smiled and replied, "I'll make braised pork belly for you tonight." After sending that, I stood up and walked out of the consultation room. At the end of the hallway, Xiaoyinjing was pushing a wheelchair toward the elevator. The old man turned his head to look in my direction, a film of moisture glazing over his clouded eyes. I nodded at the old man and smiled. He smiled back, then he was pushed into the elevator by Xiaoyinjing. The elevator doors closed. I turned and walked back to the consultation room. The envelope was still on the desk. I picked it up, tore it open, and glanced inside. It really was all those materials from back then, not a single piece missing. I smiled, locked the envelope back into the drawer of my desk. 3 days later, I performed the valve replacement surgery on Xia Changfeng. It took 4 hours in total, and it went smoothly. Post-surgery, the old man recovered well. By the 5th day, he could slowly walk on his own. Xiaoyinjing came to the ward every day, always glancing from afar across the hallway toward my consultation room, but he never stepped inside again. On the day the old man was discharged, I saw him off downstairs. He sat in the wheelchair, holding my hand, his withered fingers gripping tightly. "Qinglan, Yinjing was just not destined to have you." I crouched down and patted the back of his hand. "Grandpa Xia, don't say that. He'll meet someone better in the future." The old man sighed and looked up at Iceland's sky, blue like a gem. "This place is really beautiful. You're right to stay here." I smiled and said yes. Xiaoyinjing stood a few steps away, not coming closer. He wore a black down jacket, hands shoved in his pockets, head down, staring at the tips of his shoes. The wind blew, ruffling his hair, but he didn't bother to fix it. When the nurse pushed the wheelchair to the car, he walked over and stood in front of me. We stood face to face for a few seconds. He said, "Take care." I said, "You too." He turned, got into the car, the engine started, and the car slowly drove out of the hospital gate. I stood at the entrance, watching the taillights disappear around the corner at the intersection. Then I turned and walked back inside. When I entered the outpatient hall, Eric was waiting for me by the reception desk, holding a cup of hot cocoa, which he handed over. "They're gone." "Gone?" He smiled, took the empty cup from my hand, and naturally reached out to hold mine. His fingers were warm, wrapping around mine and slowly tightening. "Off work, want to go for a walk by the sea?" I held his hand and walked out. As I pushed open the glass door, the spring sunlight washed over my face. Iceland's winter was finally over. The days that followed flew by. Eric's apartment gradually filled with my things. Toothbrushes became a matching couple set. The refrigerator was plastered with magnets I'd brought from home. On the balcony, 2 small pots of flowers he called Icelandic roses bloomed. They were actually pink succulents. In June, I completed my 3-month evaluation at Reykjavik National Hospital. When the department head handed me my performance appraisal form, he gave me a thumbs up. When, "All excellent, you can be promoted to a full position next year." When I showed the form to Eric, he was frying fish in the kitchen. He turned his head to glance at it, and the oil in the pan sizzled loudly, forcing him to quickly spin back and flip the fish. "Impressive," he said while flipping the fish. "You climbed the ladder way faster than I did back in the day." I leaned against the kitchen doorframe, watching his back. This man was wearing a blue apron, humming an Icelandic song with a melody that was incredibly beautiful. "Eric, do you want to go see the northern lights with me?" He looked back at me, a glint of subtle amusement flickering in his blue eyes. "This time, we don't have to go to Vik," he said. "My old classmate has a cabin near Myvitten. It's less crowded there, and the Aurora is even more stunning than in Vik. That weekend, we drove off. Setting out from Reykjavik, we traveled northeast along the Ring Road for nearly 6 hours. Along the way, we passed snow-capped mountains, glaciers, black sand beaches, and steaming geothermal areas. The scenery outside the window was like a documentary that never seemed to end. As he drove, Eric told me stories about Maivatn, describing how the water there was all hot springs, with temperatures dropping to -10 degrees Celsius outside in winter. While steam still rose from the water, the cabin was small, but it had everything we needed: a fireplace, heating, a large bed made from 2 twin beds pushed together, and windows that faced directly onto the lake. On clear days, you could see the northern lights straight from inside. That night, the aurora arrived exceptionally early. As soon as the sky was fully dark, a green glow began to spread across the horizon. I wrapped myself in a down jacket and sat on a wooden bench outside the cabin. Eric came out with 2 cups of mulled wine and sat down beside me. The aurora rose from the direction of the lake, its emerald ribbons casting reflections on the water's surface, as if an entire sky had fallen into the lake. I took a sip of the mulled wine and turned to look at Eric. He was tilting his head back, gazing at the aurora, the lines of his profile appearing especially soft in the green light. Eric, he turned his head to look at me. Thank you. He smiled slightly. For what? For recognizing me on that street corner in Reykjavik, for helping me move into the apartment, for making dumplings with me, for flying back with me to save the old man, for waiting for me here. His gaze settled on my face, the aurora's light flickering in his blue eyes like shattered stars in the lake water. He reached out and pulled the collar of my down jacket together, then leaned in, pressing his forehead against mine. When his voice was very soft. I've been waiting for you ever since that day 6 years ago when you helped me revise my paper at the academic conference. When he kissed me, the aurora exploded into a brilliant sheet of green right above us. I closed my eyes. On my lips was the warmth of his breath, and at the tip of my nose was the mingled scent of laundry detergent and burning wood from his body. Behind me stretched the aurora borealis spanning the entire sky, and beneath my feet was Iceland's eternally frozen tundra. 3 months ago, when I fled to Iceland, I thought I would never believe in love again for the rest of my life. Now, I take that back. Believe in it. How could I not? It's just that the last love was cold, like Sjöjung's heart, but this one is warm, like Eric's palm, like the fire in the hearth, like the June sunlight in Iceland. The aurora was still drifting across the sky when Eric pulled away. His nose brushed against mine, and he smiled. Another cup. I leaned against his shoulder, gazing at that endless expanse of light. Okay. Spring passed, and summer arrived. Iceland's summer is short, but there are 18 hours of daylight every day. The flowers on the windowsill bloomed and then withered. My patient load at the hospital grew, and my Icelandic became more fluent. Eric said I'd gained a little weight recently, and I told him it was happiness fat. He smiled and pinched my cheek, then turned and went to the kitchen to fry fish for me. I still occasionally glanced at news from home. Dr. Chin would send occasional greeting cards, saying that old Master Sje's health was recovering well, that Sjöjung had re-entered the board of directors, but that the lawsuit with Jo Mingyuan had dragged on for over half a year without resolution. Last month, old Madame Sje fell and was hospitalized for a week, now walking with a cane. I didn't reply to any messages. Some things, once they're in the past, are in the past. Some people, once you let them go, are let go. On the day in October when snow began to fall again in Iceland, I saw a familiar figure in the hospital corridor. Sje Yunjing was standing in the cardiology waiting area, holding a bag in his hand, looking down at his phone. When I walked over, he looked up. Seeing me, the expression on his face stiffened slightly. Here to pick up medicine for the old man? I asked. Yeah. He handed the bag over. He asked me to bring you some tea from home. I took it and glanced at it. It was the Tigwinyan oolong I used to love drinking most at the Sje residence. Thank him for me. Okay. We stood facing each other for a moment. A tourism promotional video for Iceland was playing on the TV in the waiting area, the screen filled with images of auroras and waterfalls. Sjöjung stared at the TV screen and suddenly said, "The aurora here is still this beautiful." I said, "Yeah." He stood there for a little longer, then turned and walked away. I watched his back as he disappeared around the corner of the corridor. That back seemed a bit broader than before, and his stride was steadier too. He really seemed to have let go. I looked down at the tea in my hand, then carried it back to my office. At the end of the day, Eric came to pick me up as usual. Seeing the bag of tea in my hand, he asked about it. Sent by old Master Sje. He reached out and took the bag. Does this need to go in the fridge? No, just put it in the cupboard. We walked side by side out of the hospital entrance. A light snow was falling outside, the streetlights turning the snowflakes into a spray of orange starlight. Eric opened a large umbrella and held it over my head, while his other hand took mine and tucked it into the pocket of his coat. What do you want for dinner tonight? He asked. Hot pot. Does the supermarket in Iceland sell lamb slices? They should. If not, I'll go to the Chinese grocery store to find some for you. We walked toward the parking lot, stepping on the snow. The shop windows along the street were decorated for Christmas, all bright red and gleaming. Suddenly, I felt that coming to Iceland was the best decision I had ever made in my life. Later that evening, after dinner, I settled onto the sofa and scrolled through my phone, thumb gliding across the screen. A post from Dr. Chen caught my eye, a recent photo of old Master Xie. He was sitting in the courtyard of the Xie family's old residence, basking in the sunlight. Beside him rested that familiar Tiguanyin teapot. The caption read, "Old Master Xie says this year's tea is especially fragrant." I tapped the like button, then slowly turned the phone over and placed it face down on the sofa cushion, letting out a quiet breath. Eric came out of the kitchen carrying a plate of sliced apples. He sat down beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. "What are you looking at?" he asked, his voice soft and curious. "Nothing much," I murmured, leaning my head against his shoulder. I picked up a slice of apple and took a bite. The crisp sweetness filled my mouth. "Sweet," I said, smiling. He chuckled and grabbed a piece for himself. Outside, the snow was falling heavier now, thick flakes drifting past the window like a slow, silent dance. The fire in the fireplace crackled and popped, casting a warm, flickering glow across the room. I rested my weight fully against Eric's shoulder, my gaze fixed on the frost creeping across the glass pane, slowly spreading into delicate patterns. Iceland's winter had arrived once again, but this winter, I felt no cold at all. The end.